This isn't hand-drawn animation, it's time sliced apart. This is Slitscan, and it has been bending reality for 50 years. Slit-scan is an optical technique that records one narrow slice of an image. Instead of capturing a single moment in a frame or film cell, it turns time into space. It is the technique behind some of the most surreal visuals in film history, from 2001's Stargate to Doctor Who's Time Vortex to hyperspace and warp drive. Long before 3D software and digital compositing, Slit-scan was used by filmmakers and optical effects artists to create a sense of travelling through abstract, otherworldly spaces. In this video, I'm going to do a deep dive into Slit-scan, talking about what it is, how it came into being, and how it was perfected. And then, for those of you who are really invested, I'm going to show how to use Adobe After Effects to recreate Slit-scan, using a virtual setup. Hang on, you're doing split screen? This video is about Slit-scan. It's not split screen. It's two different moments in time captured in a single frame. It's thematically consistent. That's just split screen with a dictionary. To explain what Slit-scan is, we first need to understand a little about how film works. As I've talked before, a film cell is a rectangle of celluloid coated in silver halide crystals. These crystals darken when exposed to light. The brighter the light, or how much light is applied to each crystal, determines how much it darkens. If only part of the film cell is exposed to light, only that part will darken. This feature of film allowed even the earliest cinematic storytellers to combine different views onto a cell. You could block off part of the frame, film a scene, move the camera, reverse the blocking, and film something else. Now suddenly your characters are on a cliff, an alien world, or shrunk down to the size of mice. But instead of blocking part of the frame to allow for mats, what if you only exposed a thin strip of light through a thin slit in a card, and then moved that slit across the frame? You'd capture a length of time in one cell. Rather than try to demonstrate that with complex animation, here's a bunch of TikTok videos using their Slit-scan filter. But just to be clear, this isn't Slit-scan, this is strip photography. Which, granted, is a potentially problematic term to search for, even if it does date back to 1843. Strip photography was first used for panoramic photos, where your subject is long and thin, like a whole school picture, or a picture of a whole school building. Academic pics aside, strip photography was also used as a tool in aeroplane mapping, and for horse racing, car racing, and people racing. When used in racing, these weren't wide-angle snapshots. Instead, every vertical line in the frame captured the same position, just at a different time. By the way, that TikTok filter is doing this digitally. The original slit photography was a photochemical process that required either a shutter that could be held open, or a camera without a shutter entirely. The photographer ensures the only light to touch the film is what comes through the slot. So strip photography either sees a camera moving parallel across a fixed slot, like in horse racing or mapping, or a camera rotating around a fixed slot, like in panoramic images. In these cases, either the camera or the slot is fixed. So what happens if you move the camera towards the slot, or slit, while also moving or scanning the background at the same time? You'd create some kind of transforming slot technique. Or a... Picture the scene. It's 1964. You're Stanley Kubrick, and it's over 3 decades before you make Tom Cruise walk through a door 95 times. You need a project to keep you busy in the meantime. So for your next movie, you pick a sci-fi story about extraterrestrials, their shepherding of mankind, and a voyage to Saturn. Kubrick approached science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke to collaborate with on an original story. Drawing loosely on Clarke's short story The Sentinel, the two developed the film and novel in parallel. allowing the imagery and narrative to evolve together. Kind of like how James Gunn made the Peacemaker TV show and Rewatch podcast. Except nothing like that. This was all happening in 1964. There wasn't even a photo of the Earth from space. The big sci-fi movies of the time, Forbidden Planet and The Day the Earth Stood Still, while remarkable, used speculative technology primarily in service of allegory and story. Kubrick and Clarke were aiming for something different, grounded in contemporary scientific understanding. At the World's Fair that year, a small production company called Graphics Pictures were exhibiting an immersive Cinerama 360 short called To the Moon and Beyond. Graphics Pictures primarily produced films for the US Air Force and NASA, so this was a bit of a departure for them. Part of the way through Beyond, there is a sequence created by the father of computer animation himself, John Whitney. I've talked about Whitney before in my video on how CGI was added to film. He was an artist who spent decades researching different ways to create computer animations. And while I knew about his work with optical printers, I had no idea he was the originator of Slit-scan. When Kubrick saw To the Moon and Beyond, he more or less immediately retained the services of Graphic Films for pre-production. One of their ex-employees, laid off waiting for his next gig, with a kid just starting out. He blagged Kubrick's number, and the rest is history. That kid was Doug Trumbull. Trumbull had a rare opportunity. Working directly for Kubrick, he was able to experiment with cameras, lenses, light, and motors to see what was possible.
And so I would regularly take these little experiments down to Stanley's office and say, I think we can do Jupiter. And he would look at my little Polaroid and he'd say, yep, looks good to me.
Part of Trumbull's experiments were around strip photography. During this extended development period, he discovered that if you move a camera towards a strip of light, you could create an effect where the strip grows out towards the side of the frame. Then, instead of just white light, if you backlight some artwork, the line visible through the slit is drawn out. The next logical step is that if you move the artwork behind the slit as the camera is moving towards it, you see the artwork as if in 3D space, as if the artwork was projected onto the wall of a corridor. This long exposure travelling camera technique produced one frame of film. To make it feel like the camera was travelling down the corridor, the next frame needed the artwork projection to appear to move. To accomplish this, Trumbull nudged the artwork's starting position over slightly. It still travelled the same distance, but by shifting the starting point for each subsequent frame, it created the illusion of forward motion down the corridor. For Slitscan to work, you need a completely dark room, a camera without a shutter, mounted on a rail powered by a motor. The artwork needs to be on its own rail, moving perpendicularly to the camera. Trumbull set the camera to travel the length of the rail, about 14 feet or 4.3 metres from the back of the room to the slit. The artwork was painted on glass sheets 15 feet or 4.6 metres long. And the camera took a minute to complete the journey, or possibly 4 minutes, sources disagree. Remember, that would have created one frame, in complete darkness. If someone opened the door at the wrong time, just doesn't bear thinking about. 24 frames per second, let's say 10 minutes to reset and shoot each frame, Trumbull could spend 36 hours shooting a 10-second sequence. In modern terms, it's about the same patience required to wait for a Cinema 4D render to finish.
All this produced one wall of the corridor. To produce the second wall, the film was exposed again, with the camera nudged over so that the two slits appear to start at the same point.
What was originally intended to be a 9-month period of pre-production became 2.5 years of Trumbull's life. 2001 was a film that somehow predicted the iPad, simulated zero gravity with room-sized spinning sets, or glass and sticky tape. It set a new benchmark for realism in the depiction of space. In fact, the only thing it couldn't convincingly pull off was Saturn's rings, so the destination was quietly changed to Jupiter, because even Kubrick and Trumbull have their limits. When it was finally released in 1968, it polarised audiences. According to its star Keir Dulles, Rock Hudson walked out of the premiere. To be fair, this was the year of Oliver, The Graduate and Planet of the Apes. Mainstream audiences just weren't ready. The film developed a cult following, and over the years it has been recognised as a masterpiece. The Motion Picture Academy did at least appreciate it, as Kubrick was awarded an Oscar for the effects in the movie. Not Trumbull, though.
The Academy only allows 3 statuettes and would not break the rule and make it 4. So Kubrick decided to take the award for himself, and we didn't get anything.
Despite clashing with Kubrick after the movie, Trumbull would go on to have an incredible career, both in visual effects and directing. I've used a clip from a masterclass he presented a few years before his death, where he takes the audience through his movies. If you have the time, it's well worth watching. After 2001 came out, Slitscan didn't show up again for years. And when it did, well, it was about time. Douglas Trumbull appears to have been happy to share the process for Slitscan. I've seen this write-up often quoted, and frankly it doesn't include any useful information.
This was his description of how Slit-scan worked, which I read over and over again, and I learned nothing from this description.
When Slitscan resurfaced years later, it wasn't inspired from some technical documentation, but a need for a similar visual effect. Bernard Lodge, who had created Doctor Who's iconic howl-around title sequences for the first 3 Doctors, faced a problem. As the BBC moved to colour television, the sci-fi show needed a colour title sequence. But the howl-around effects only worked because of a quirk with the black and white cameras the BBC was using at the time. The immediate solution Lodge devised was to use colour filters on the footage. But by 1973, producer Barry Letts felt that that style had lost its awe. Lodge, being a fan of Trumbull's Stargate Sequence, decided to reproduce it.
I, like all my colleagues, have been absolutely knocked out by the Stargate Sequence in Kubrick's 2001.
What Lodge realised was that the slit in Slitscan doesn't need to be a line. Any shape you can create as an outline will work. The process was essentially the same. Lodge had read the same articles as Knoll and realised that he could use a Rostrum camera to reproduce the technique. A computer-controlled setup which involved a camera looking down at a backlit platform. Rostrum cameras were a mainstay of television effects for controlled moves over images. The camera could only move about 5 feet, 1.5 metres, with each frame taking 30 seconds to expose. So for days, Lodge patiently built tunnels out of light, strips of transparent plastic, polarising filters, black card, and so much patience. While Lodge went 2D with his slits, creating shapes to form tunnels, he wasn't the only artist looking with jealous gaze upon Slitscan. And somewhere in California, a question was asked. What happens if you just use dots? At Industrial Light and Magic, John Dykstra was given a challenge. How do you show a spacecraft accelerating faster than light? He hit on an idea that was close enough to Slitscan that I'm including it in this video. Where Trumbull worked with slits and Lodge with shapes, Dykstra reduced the idea to its simplest form, dots. He took sheets of black card and punched hundreds of tiny holes into them. When backlit, those pinpricks became starfields. Using a motion control rig of his own design, the camera pushed forward while the shutter remained open. Each dot accumulated across time, stretching into a streak of light. It is the same conceptual trick as Slitscan, capturing time. And with the command "punch it," the Millennium Falcon was hurled into hyperspeed. There is one final famous use of Slitscan, the Enterprise D going to warp. But it is not the only use of Slitscan in that series, and I'd argue the second one is even more impressive. But first things first, the 3D warp stretch. To achieve this look, Dave Carson, who was ILM's project supervisor for TNG's opening episodes, approached John Knoll. Knoll, just 14 when Star Wars came out, had become Mr. Slitscan at ILM, having used the process for his student film while at USC Film School. 6 months after graduation, he joined ILM. For the second time. Oh, did I skip that part? In 1978, John's father was attending a conference in Anaheim. Tagging along, Noel Jr. took a chance, found ILM's phone number in the book, and called. From that call, he got to spend the day at their Van Nuys facility. So maybe he didn't join ILM, but it's a cute origin story. And when challenged to reinvent warp speed, Noel didn't invent something from scratch, he extended a lineage. Trumbull had stretched images through slits. Lodge had shaped those slits. Dykstra had reduced them to dots. Noel brought the idea back to slits again, but wrapped it around a physical object. He built a two-sided box on rails. Each wall had a slit with spotlight shining through. Inside the box, he placed the Enterprise model and set up a motion control camera. As the box moved, the starship was illuminated in a thin vertical strip. With only this strip being visible, a camera was dollied in. This meant as the light strip hit the front of the ship, it was further away from the camera. As the camera got closer, the back of the ship occupied more of the frame. When shot with long exposure, the Enterprise appeared to stretch out. One issue I had when recreating this effect inside After Effects is the unilluminated engineering hull blocks part of the saucer, meaning that I had strong black shadows. I noticed in behind the scenes footage there appears to be another light. So maybe there is part of the process not shared? Then I noticed the same shadow in this shot. So I guess it's just a limitation of the 3D slit scan? As I mentioned earlier, the 3D warp stretch is a famous Trek use of slit scan, but it wasn't the only use. Once the Enterprise is at warp speed, the rainbow stars moving past the camera are also achieved through slit scan. Let's piece this together. Thanks to John Dykstra's efforts, we know that backlit black card on film with hundreds of pinpricks look like stars. And thanks to Whitney et al., we know that if you move a background while shooting slit scan, you create a sense of movement. So what would happen if you moved a second lithograph film, also full of holes, over your pinprick stars card? Every so often, two holes would line up, and a star would appear as a streak. Great for TNG's credits, for example. But for the actual Warp Stars effects, Noel was tasked with going a little further. The producers wanted to denote that warp speed was not just flying very fast, it was the universe being warped around the ship. Noel came up with the idea of the stars appearing to be redshifted as they moved at warp. Redshift is an astrophysics term explaining the phenomenon where a star's speed appears to shift its light towards the red end of the spectrum. It's one of the key ways we know the universe is expanding. This extremely complicated concept had entered pop culture in the late 70s, along with the resurgence in space sci-fi. To achieve the look, Noel placed unexposed photographic film on the slit scan bed. He then added one of the star cards, and from above lit it with a light, in front of which he added a moving set of red, green and blue filters. As the card and film were moved across the platform, each hole exposed a streak, red at one end through green to blue. Each streak was less than a centimetre across. When developed, this rainbow film was used as a second set of stars for the slit scan. This meant each streak would initially appear red, then move through the visible spectrum, creating an iconic look that 3D particle software took decades to replicate. My turn. I hope you enjoyed the first part. If you're not into recreating effects for yourself, thanks very much for watching. And a massive thank you to the people who have supported me through Ko-fi. After Effects was first released during the Next Generation's run. Version 1 came out in 1993. And I think some of the less shouted about effects are the older ones. I can't find out when the echo effect was added, but I've used AE from version 5.5 and it was there then, I'd swear it. It's the echo effect's ability to reproduce long exposure that makes me think this was its intended purpose. Let me explain. Here's my setup. I have this cool close-up of salt crystals, and I'm using a shape layer as a track matte. It's literally just a rotated square with a stroke but no fill. When I animate the image to move across the frame, we get this. I'm using the classic 3D renderer so that the track matte is preserved when I make the layers 3D and add a 3D camera. And then, if I animate the camera to move towards the slit, we get our first sense of the familiar slit scan. I'll bring this composition into a new composition and then add the echo effect. And I'll change the echo time to a positive instead of a negative. And set the number of echoes to 300. It's like we're taking a long exposure. Because of the echo time and comp frame rate, 300 instances is 10 seconds in a single frame. And when I change the operator to maximum, that definitely looks familiar. But if I preview the comp, we don't get the sense of movement. What we've done is recreate one frame. For the next frame, we need to increment the image's position. Here's the first comp again, and I have a position slider which is informed by Essential Graphics to use this expression to move the image's starting position. On the parent comp, I added this layer.index to the essential property. Which meant that layer 2 is 2, layer 3 is set to 3, and so on, and duplicated this comp to get 300 layers. And set each layer to only be one frame long, and use sequence layers to stagger them. And the end result is this. I've rattled through that explanation because, truth be told, I don't think anyone is mad enough to reproduce Slitscan this way these days. I have included a link to my project in the description, so feel free to check that out. No matter what I tried, I ended up with quite slow movement, which meant speeding up the end result. A 30-second comp produced 10 seconds of video. I am aware there is a plugin on AE scripts called Slitscan, but is more of a slicker time displacement effect than a 2001 style Slitscan. In reality, thanks to all the improvements in 3D processing, there are easier ways to achieve the end result. If you're watching this in early 2026, then check back in a couple of weeks, as I'll be releasing tutorials covering how to match the end results. But then just ignore this next line. Check out the tutorials linked in the description, where I show how to recreate the end results for 2001 Stargate, Doctor Who's Time Vortex, and both Star Trek's Warp Stretch and Warp Stars. Thanks very much for watching. If you have any experience with Slitscan, long exposure photography, or any corrections, then please feel free to comment below. There's two things I'm taking away from my reading up on this topic. The first is that playing with the settings, whether in camera or in software, is a great way to discover and develop new techniques. And secondly, if you want a career in VFX, be like Doug Trumbull and John Knoll and take a chance and contact a professional. Worst thing they can do is ignore you.